This is part 62 of ASP.NET MVC tutorial. In this video, we'll discuss implementing search functionality in an MVC application. For the purpose of this demo, we'll be using this table TBL employee. Here is the SQL script to create this table, and this is to insert sample data into that table. I'll have the SQL script available on my blog in case if you need it. Now, based on this table, we want to design a view like this with a search interface. We want the users to be able to search either by name or by gender. If they want to search by name, they simply select that radio button, enter the name of the employee. If there are any employees whose names start with whatever the user has typed here, then we want to list those employees. On the other hand, if no employee name starts with whatever we have typed here, then we want to display a message stating no rows match search criteria. On the other hand, if I want to search by gender, I simply select that radio button, enter the gender there, click search. All the employees with matching gender should then be displayed. Let's see how to achieve this. Obviously, the first step is to generate an ADO.NET entity data model based on this table TBL employee. So let's flip to Visual Studio. Here I have a blank ASP.NET MVC4 application. I don't have anything in models, views, and controllers. So the first step is to add ADO.NET entity data model. So let's right click on the models folder, add a new item, select data, ADO.NET entity data model, and let's name it sample data model. Click add. We want to generate our model from the database, and we want our connection string to be stored as sample db context in web.config file. Click next. This is going to connect to the database, retrieve all the tables, views, and stored procedures. Expand tables, select table TBL employee, and we want our entities to be living in models namespace. Click finish. This should generate TBL employee entity, but we want our entity to be named as employee, so let's rename it to employee. Save everything. Let's build the solution. The next step is to add the home controller. So right click on the controllers folder, add a controller, and let's name it home controller. Use this template MVC controller with read/write actions and views using entity framework. The model class is going to be employee, and the data context class is going to be sample db context, and we want to use razor views. Click add. This should generate the home controller and all the required views: index, details, delete, create, etc. Okay, so let's save everything, build the solution, and navigate to the index view. So this should display the index view with all the employees data from table TBL employee. Now let's format this a little better. So within the index view, let's use a div tag and set the style attribute. And let's move the closing div tag to the end of the view. And then let's also set a border for the table. With these changes, let's refresh this view. So we get the border and the font family set to area. Now let's have action as the heading for this last column. Alright, so let's refresh this. Alright, now let's design the search interface. Basically, we want search by this literal text there, and then two radio buttons, one for name and the other one for gender. So let's achieve that. So let's use another paragraph tag, and let's use a bold tag, and then specify the string search by, and next to that we need a radio button, and to generate that let's use radio button HTML helper. And then the first parameter obviously here is the name for that radio button. The name is going to be, basically, why are we using these radio buttons? We are using them to specify what we want to search by. Do you want to search by name, or do you want to search by gender? So let's give it a meaningful name. So let's name it search by. And then the next parameter is the value for that radio button. The value is going to be name. So if you want to search by name, then you will use this radio button. And next to the radio button, we want to display the text as name. So let's include that. And then we want another radio button for gender. So let's copy and paste that there. So the text is going to be gender and the value is going to be gender. Okay, and then in the next line we need a text box control and a search button. So let's include an HTML break, and then to generate the text box, let's use text box HTML helper. And then why are we using this text box control? We're using this text box control to specify the search term. Okay, so let's give this text box a name. Since we are using it to specify the search term, I'm going to give it a name of search. Alright, with these changes, actually we need a button as well. So let's include input type is equal to submit, and the value on that button we want it as search. Alright, so with all these changes, let's refresh this view and see if we get the interface that we expect. So we get the interface that we expect. Alright, now when we click this button, we want to retrieve some data as part of get request. Since we are not going to change the state of data, it's better to get the data using a get request. Okay, and for that purpose we need to use a form tag. So basically all these controls need to be wrapped inside a form tag. And to generate a form tag, we can use begin form HTML helper. So at HTML dot begin form, and then since we want an opening and closing since we want a closing form tag to be auto generated, let's use the using statement and wrap the call to begin form HTML helper inside that. And look at this, the moment I do that, it considers this name and gender as C# code. Okay, but we know that we want that to be treated as literal text so that it gets displayed next to that name radio button and gender radio button. Okay, so to specify our intention to raise a view that it's a literal text, let's use this text element. Let's close that, and let's do the same thing for gender. Okay, and then look at this, when we submit this button, we want to basically invoke the index action within the home controller. That's what is pulling out this data and displaying in this table. Okay, so we want to invoke index action within home controller, and we want to do that as a get request. So we need to specify that within the form tag. So this form tag helper has got several overloaded versions. I'm going to use the version where you can specify the name of the action. In our case it's going to be index, and the name of the controller, it's going to be home controller, and which method do you want to use to retrieve data. Do you want to do that using a get request or a post request? Since we are not modifying the state of the data, we can do that using a get request. So the action name is going to be index, and the controller name is going to be home, and which method we want to use? Get method. Okay, alright, with these changes let's save everything and let's refresh this view. And notice that when the form first loads, by default I want a name radio button to be selected, because in my organization usually most of the employees search by name, so I want that to be as the default selected option. And to do that, we have another overloaded version of this radio button helper where you can specify whether you want that radio button to be checked or not. Okay, so if you want that to be checked, pass true. And then let's refresh this. So when the form loads, name radio button should be checked. Alright, now let's say for example I want to search all the employees whose names start with S. I type in S there, click on search, and look at what's going to happen. Look at that, the radio button selection that is passed to the, as part of the URL, search by is equal to name. I have selected name radio button, so I want to search by name, and I want to search all the employees whose names start with S, so that is passed as part of this query string. basically both the values are passed to the server as part of the URL in the form of query strings. Now all that is left is basically to retrieve those values within the index action and then filter the employees based on the search string. So within the index action, I'm going to use two parameters, string search by, string the search term. So obviously, when this action method is reached, the default model binder is going to pass the values from the query string into this method automatically. And then what we need to do here, if search by is equal to gender, then we want to filter the employees based on gender. And this is the method which does that. I mean, this line is going to return all the employees, but we don't want all the employees. We want to filter the employees. So let's go ahead and use a where clause and then specify your condition. So what is our condition? Employee such that employee gender is equal to whatever is there in the search. Okay. Now, on the other hand, if search by is not gender, then it's going to be name, in which case we want to search by name. So let's include that in the else part. Let's copy this code and paste it right here. Now let's say, for example, if I type letter S here, then we want to search all employees whose name start with S and then display them here. So basically, instead of using a where clause, it will do an exact match. Instead of that, let's use starts with method. Oh, employee. Let's use a where clause x such that x dot name starts with whatever is the search term. Alright, let's save this. Let's build the solution and let's actually navigate to home controller index action. So by default, name radio button should be selected. Okay, so name radio button. Look at this, we have a problem here. As soon as we have navigated to the index action, we don't have any employees displayed there. Why is that? That's basically because when this view is loaded, this index action method is expecting these parameter values for these two parameters, but then obviously nothing is passed here. So basically, name is going to be empty, gender is going to be empty. So it's going to search by name because it's going to come to else part, and then it's going to search by name, and then since search is null, it won't find any employee whose name is null. So obviously it is displaying an empty table, list there. Now by default, when I don't specify anything, when I load this view, we want to display all the employees. If that is your requirement, then what you need to do is you need to specify another condition here. So there may be gender or it could be null. So how do we do that? How do we specify that? Or search term is null. Similarly, we need to specify the same condition right here. Name starts with search term or search could be null. Let's build this once again and let's refresh this. So all employees should be listed now. Okay, now I can search by an employee name. So if I type S there, search, look at that, I get one employee whose name starts with the S. On the other hand, if I want to search by gender, let's say I want all male employees, select gender type male, search, look at that, I get both the male employees. Now look at this, if I select, for example, name, and I type, let's say, X, we don't have an employee whose name starts with X. So when I click search, look at that, it doesn't display anything. But what is our requirement? We want to display a message stating no rows match search criteria, in case if there are no employees matching your search criteria. So how do we achieve that? It's pretty simple. So on our index view, so what is the model for your index view? It's IEnumerable of employee, meaning a list of employees. Okay, now that's what is the model. So what I'm going to do, here we have a table tag, and this tr is going to display that header, what you see right here. And then if there are no employees, if the model count is 0, then we know there are no employees. In that case, what you need to do, instead of executing this for each loop, because there's no point, there are no employees, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to conditionally check at if the model for this view is list of employees. If the count of that is 0, then we know there are no employees, in which case we want to display this message there. Okay, and we want to display that message as part of the table. So I'm going to render a table row, and then I'm going to use a td. And then how many tds are there within that table? We have 4 tds basically. So if you look at this, 1 2 3 and 4, we have 4 tds. So we want this single td to span across the width of those 4 tds, and to achieve that we're going to make use of call span attribute and set that to 4. And then here we want to display that message stating no rows match search criteria. So no rows match search criteria. Alright, so if this condition is true, then display this. Else, if the count is not 0, then we know there are some employees to be displayed. In that case, go ahead and execute this for each loop. So let's wrap that inside that. Now another thing to keep in mind, look at that, we have already used an at symbol here to specify the code block, so we don't have to use this at symbol. Otherwise we'll get a runtime error. Let's leave it there and refresh this view and see what's going to happen. Let's actually navigate to the index action. Look at that, we get an error. So all you need to do is get rid of that extra at symbol from there. Save. Let's refresh this, and it should work as expected. Now look at this, if I type X, we don't have employees whose names start with X. Look at that, no rows match search criteria. We get it as expected. Alright, on this slide you can find resources for ASP.NET, C# and SQL Server interview questions. That's it for today. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.